It's in that striped bag. She opened up like me, you know, and keep it open on there. I don't talk so much and I get dried mouth.
And Masha, if you could read the slate, please.
Okay. This is Judith Swimmer, and she comes from a small town near New Jersey by the name of Etko. And I'm Masha Loen. I'm interviewing her. Today is February 14, 1995. Thank you. Let's go. Let's start rolling.
And you could set the slate down.
Forget about it. That's it. You can keep it as a
souvenir.
You'll get it there. Okay.
All right.
1 second, Masha. And
You'll tap me on the shoulder, okay? Judith, would you tell us your life story? First, we'll start with the beginning, when where you were born and your childhood and so on.
My name is Judith Swimmer. I was born on October 21st, 1927 in Krakow, Poland. My parents' name was Steiner. My maiden name, of course, is Steiner. I have one sister who is...
Judith, how was life in Krakow before the war as a child? What can you remember?
Well, I was born to a fairly well-to-do family. I went to grade school, of course. We had a very pleasant life, very close family life. I had an older sister, which I adored and loved. And my father was an unbelievable man altogether. He was a walking encyclopedia. He was just one of the most marvelous people that I have ever encountered in my life. He had a beautiful voice. He had a special gift to be together with children, and he had an unbelievable amount of information, and all my cousins from the grade school to the university level, whenever they had any kind of questions or any kind of problems, used to come to him for answers.
And what was his name?
Abbe Steiner.
Abbe Steiner.
Yeah. And my father spoke a few languages quite fluently. He was just an incredible man. He knew about music and poetry and philosophy and just about everything that I could think of, and we could always run to him and listen to him for stories. He would tell us.
Where was his business?
My parents were owners of a hardware store. Our store was located on the corner of Lwowska and Plac Zgody, the infamous Plac Zgody, from where later on during the war all the Aussiedlungs were.
All the deportations.
The relocations were taken. We had a hardware store, and my mother always had a help in the house, and we were just, my sister and I were taken to school in the morning and brought back home, and we had all kind of sports activities. We would be ice skating and going during the summer with the whole family on outings on the Vistula River with on little boats, and we would be going on our vacation during the summer to all different places. During the winter we would go to Zakopane for skiing. And it was just a very wonderful, comfortable life.
Did you feel any anti-Semitism at that time as a
Well,
child?
of course, I was so very young that I was not that much aware of it, but from what I have heard around the house, of course, I had cousins that were much older than I was, that were already attending Jagiellon University, and it happened more than once that they were thrown down the stairs by the other Gentile students and were brought to hospitals because they had all kind of injuries. And others that could, for example, I had a cousin that wanted to study to become a doctor, and he could not do it. He had to go into law because that was about the only thing that the Jew can do. And of course, we have encountered quite a few anti-Semitic remarks, even in schools, even in with our
school.
Yeah. But just to give you an example,
Did you go in a school that was mixed Christian and Jewish children, or just Jewish kids?
I went to a Christian and Jewish school.
Mixed
My
school.
sister went to a private Hebrew school.
Yeah.
And I have been tutored in Hebrew and Hebrew history by private teachers.
Yeah. And what happened in that school?
Well, in that school, I remember one incident where there were only about 7 or 8 Jewish students in my class. And that must have been about 3rd grade or so. And my name was Judith, which in Polish was Judita.
Yeah.
And but my teacher but everybody called me Dusia because that was an endearing name.
Yeah.
But my teacher insisted on calling me not Dusia or not Judita, but Juda all the time, because the name Jude was in German the Jew.
That's right.
And many
Did it
times.
bother you then?
Oh, it bothered me very much.
Then why
because
didn't-
we were
but
very,
you couldn't stop her from doing it?
No, I couldn't stop.
Or your parents?
No.
She just did it.
And there were quite a few incidents. As a matter of fact, my parents were contemplating to take me out of that school and put me to the private Hebrew school, but unfortunately the war came in between, and so that was it. Otherwise, the life was quite comfortable. For me, I was just a child. I did not realize what was happening. I did overhear my parents, my uncles, my aunts discussing what was going on all over Europe. And we had an uncle that was my mother's oldest brother that lived in Berlin and in Germany, and he had to come to they threw him out of there. He had to be separated from his family, and they sent him over to Krakow.
Why was he separate from the family? Was he in a
Well,
different
he
religion?
happened to be married to a non-Jewish lady, and they had one and only son who, at the age of 15, I am not absolutely clear about it, whether he did it on his own because or his parents sent him out to just save his life, because in Germany, as you know, all this started so many years before. So in 1936 and 7 and 8, when we were still not at war, the Jews in Germany experienced a lot of...
So they sent him away from Berlin?
He went to Israel.
To Israel. To Palestine.
To Palestine at that time. And fortunately he survived the war and he's still alive. Of course my uncle died, as the rest of my family.
Yeah. So how did it start all? How did it happen?
Well, in 1939, on September 1st, the war was declared, of course, on Poland, and at that time all the majority of Jewish male population tried to run away from the Germans, because there were all kind of rumors about how male Jews are being treated. And so my father, together with my uncles and my older cousins, they all went toward the east, and hoping, as everybody else did, that the war will be over very shortly, and that everything that the whole world is not going to let Hitler get away with it, so everything will be come back to normal. Unfortunately, it took months before we saw our father again. He was from I understood he was at the border of Romania or Hungary, and could have escaped, could have saved his life and go with the others toward Palestine or other countries. But of course he had a wife whom he loved very much, and children that he adored, my sister and myself, and felt the responsibility to come back home. So he came home at the end of December, if I'm not mistaken, 1939. But in the meantime, my mother, my sister, and I, we were struggling very much. We were left alone. My mother was not that used to handle everything on her own, and she was left with 2 children. And the store was still open. Approximately 4 or 5 months. I don't really remember exactly.
The store was still open.
But the store was still open. It was very, very difficult to get any merchandise for the store. And my sister and I tried to help as much as possible to lighten my mother's life, and we would go to the places that my parents used to buy their merchandise from and try to get some iron stoves or some pipes or some nails and or some dishes, because our store also had all kind of.
And the Polish people still came buying from you?
From time to time,
yeah.
But no, we had
Polish
all kind of clientele in our stores. Well, when my father came home, I think I actually realize it now more than ever that was the time that the whole spark just died in him. He was not the same man when he came back anymore. There was no more as much laughter, and of course to me I was just a child, and I just couldn't understand what was happening, why everybody was sad and everybody was but this
Did you understand?
the disappointment that the war was not over so quickly must have struck my father very hard, and the spark went out of him, really. But we struggled. And during that time it was very difficult, because the Germans would come unexpectedly into our house, into any other Jewish household, but I remember coming them several times into our house and searching for jewelry, for pictures. My mother had the most beautiful Gobelin embroideries that she spent months and years doing them, and I remember in our bedroom was a huge picture of a really just absolutely gorgeous, and I remember the soldiers just taking the Germans, tearing this down from the wall and breaking the glass and pulling out the picture and rolling it up and taking it away. And these were such an unexpected, such a violation of your privacy. Of course, we didn't know at that time how much worse everything will become, but these were the very first impression. It was just terrible, and if you try to say something, they would hit you. They hit my father several times, and it was just absolutely terrible to us to see a stranger hitting my father or pushing my mother around or whatever. And that happened more than once. It happened several times. Then it's really a blur. All these, I have been so young and so shocked that I just could not pinpoint exactly when and what happened. But I know that eventually all of us had to register, and that slowly one freedom after the other was taken away from us. Of course, we were not allowed to go to school. I started my 5th grade in September of 1939, and by, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later, I was not allowed to go to school anymore. And so it was just, right away we had to wear armbands with the Star of David on it. I was too young to have my own identification papers, so I was added to my father's card, and then all of us. Then it came.
What happened to your store at that time?
Oh, the store was taken away. And then they gave us an ultimatum that within 24 hours, 20 hours, I don't even remember exactly, we were allowed to take just certain amount, 10 kilo per person or 15 kilo per person or whatever, and we have to leave our premises, we have to abandon our house. And with all that, everything came so all of a sudden, and my mother was the practical one, so she grabbed some, probably some food and some blankets and pillows. And my father grabbed his beloved books, his lexicon that weighed a ton. But that was what was most important to him, were books that were left to him by his father. And fortunately, we had an uncle that had my father's brother, who had a very high position with a Walcownia company before the war. And and that was outside of Krakow in a place named Borek Wałęski. And since he had a high position there and his family already moved out there on their own, and he had an apartment, 3 rooms and a kitchen, and so he shared this apartment. We didn't have where to go, so he took us into Borek Wałęski.
Is that already in ghetto?
No, that was no ghetto yet. That has nothing to do with ghetto.
They just moved you out of your house.
They just moved us out. And my uncle, my father's brother, was in one room. We were in another room, and another family lived in the 3rd room. And that was just terrible, because that's we were just completely out of our own home and our own store, and food was hard to get food, and my sister tried to, even though she was at that time about 15 years old, 15 or 16, she tried to help by tutoring younger children, Jewish children that were around there. And I was trying, my mother and father, they had to go, I don't remember, once a week, twice a week, they had to go and to a forced labor to spend a day cleaning the streets, or during the winter to clean the snow. So I tried to go for my mother, so that, because she was sickly and she couldn't do this, and we were trying everything possible to live as a family. And then another order came that they are forming a ghetto in Krakow, back in Krakow. So from Borek Wałęski, we went back to the ghetto, which was back in Podgórze, which in Krakow, in the same. Podgórze was the name of the district, or of the section of of Krakow, where originally we lived there, but on a different street. And so this time we went to live together with my other uncle. And they shared the apartment with us. And so now we were in ghetto.
They formed the ghetto.
Excuse me?
They formed the ghetto.
They formed the ghetto right there. I cannot give you the exact dates because I was
That's
so
all right.
young. I absolutely do not remember. Besides, I think that I have probably blocked half of the things that happened to me for my own safety. At least this is what my doctors told me after the war. We were in the ghetto for quite a few months, and it was getting worse and worse all the time. We had to have a strict, everybody had to work for the Germans, and still I was still too young to have my own papers, so I was added to my father's Kenkarte, which was a name for the identification and working papers. And so my father was working, they took him to work on a Bauhof, which was a train, was it a railroad or whatever. They were taking the people early in the morning, the group of people that my father was to be with. They were going in the morning out of Krakow, and in the evening they would be coming back. And I think my sister worked for Madrich or Optima, one of the companies. And we were desperate to secure some place for my mother, but that was very difficult also because she didn't have any skill or whatever. And of course it was just terrible because this is when they started to round up people from time to time. First it was small groups. We didn't even know where they were disappearing. People were disappearing from the ghetto. A lot of them were, there was an underground in Krakow ghetto also, and one of my cousins, as a matter of fact, Leopold Steiner, was arrested and taken on Montelupik, which was a prison outside of Krakow, and he was shot there, being one of the resistance people. And well, of course, there was always fear, because if anyone from the family was connected with anything like this, they would punish the whole family. So everybody was very strained. The stress was unbelievable. The hunger was getting worse and worse. The conditions were getting terrible. And the constant fear of disappearing. Then it started to get a little bit more official. They were rounding, I don't even remember when was the first big roundup, where they took a lot of people and just took them in the trucks and took them out of the city and of the ghetto. And of course there were all kind of rumors, but we never knew where they really went. Then my parents were desperate, since I was so very young, to secure some kind of a job for me so that I would be protected. And since my parents were having some business connections with the Kabelfabrik, which was outside of, it was in Płaszów actually. That was an electromechanical kind of a factory that was making cables.
Yeah.
And my parents used to sell them merchandise in wholesale before the war. And so my father knew a few of the administrators there and some of the engineers there. And he found out that they were forming a group of 300 people that would be going to work in that fabric and to that factory, and somehow or other he managed to arrange it so through the engineers that they requested that I should be in that group also. And so I started to work for the cable factory, which meant that every morning at 5 o'clock or 5:30 I had to be ready with the group of the 300, and I was the youngest one with them. And we would walk all the way to the outside of the Krakow ghetto to Płaszów, which was, I don't know, 8-10 miles of walking. Of course, we were not transported, we had to walk there.
That was in Płaszów.
That was from Krakow to Płaszów. That was a section of Płaszów, not the Płaszów where they later built the big camp, but a little bit farther down. And I went there in the morning, and at night they would bring us back. We had to walk back. It was a 12 to 14-hour shift altogether. And
did they give you anything to eat that time?
Well, it just the one thing, well, that right in the beginning we would get some bowl of soup or something there, and some ersatz coffee or whatever. It was never enough, never adequate, never enough, but it was something. And then one day they told us to come. That was actually on the 28th of October. It was 7 days after my birthday, that they told us to be, instead at 5 o'clock in the morning, we had to go at 4:30 or whatever on that place. And there were all kind of rumors that there is going to be a big roundup during that day, and somehow or other, I don't know whether my mother has some kind of a...
By talking about roundup, you're talking about the selections.
I'm not talking about selection.
Roundup,
I'm talking about a roundup. How you say?
Aktie.
How you say?
Aktie,
I don't know how to
roundup.
say Wysiedlenie, Aussiedlung in German.
Yeah, I
when
know.
they were
Aussiedlung
taking.
is like yeah.
I
Go
do
ahead.
not know a purge.
Yeah.
They were purging the ghetto of the Jews that they didn't like. I don't know how to explain this any differently. But there were rumors that this is going to be a big one, that this time they need thousands and thousands of Jews that have vacate the ghetto. And so all those small factories, that there were quite a few of small factories outside of the ghetto that the German entrepreneurs were opening those little factories like Schindler or any others, and they were taking the forced labor, like the one that I was in, or like my father that was at the Bauhof, and they would take them in the morning, and when they heard that something is coming up, they wanted to secure their people, they would take them out of the ghetto a little bit earlier. But the one thing that I think I just have to live with it, and I will never forgive myself, because my mother somehow felt and knew.
We have 1 minute.
1 minute, go ahead, yeah.
That will be it, I guess. And she wanted to say goodbye to me, and I pushed her away because I was afraid that if I'll say goodbye, I'll never see her again. And when I came back that night, my mother wasn't there, and my father was beating his head against the wall, and my sister was trying to push him away from it.
Hold it at.
Or something. Oh,
You tell me when we start, because I want you to tell me again over where you started. I know it's hard starting. Go ahead, Judith, tell us.
Yeah, well, that's they took my